Okay. Uh, Trivikram says, how do you balance complexity and brevity in screenwriting for shorter attention spans without sacrificing depth or resorting to gimmicks? That's a good question. Here's my basic take on that. The thing about complexity is that complexity is not about density. In other words, you can have things be complex and simple. Complexity is the combination of simple things. Complexity is saying there is more than one element to this. However, that does not mean hard to follow. It does not mean long. You can have a complex short. You can have, to me, complexity is the layering of ideas so that you're not simply saying one thing. You're saying, this is true, but this is also true. That is what complexity is. And it often leads to ambiguity, and it often leads to things not being an easy answer. So those are hard to sell, but there's nothing inherently, well, that's not true. If you're going to worry about the audience's attention span, you're fine. If you're going to worry about the audience's desire to have things be simple, bold answers that take a side, then you're not going to get complexity because that's antithetical. But the other thing is when you say depth, sacrificing depth, depth and complexity to me are actually two different things. To me, what people call depth is actually complexity, is actually, in other words, to me, depth is if a character or a story or a line or something has more than one element to it, more than one thing going on. In other words, if a character is a thief and all they are is a thief, that's not very complex. It's not very deep. If they are a thief who is also suffering from an illness, or also is in love, or also is a patriot, or whatever it is, as soon as you get more than one thing going on in a character, in a scene, in anything, that is what we call depth or complexity. And you can do that incredibly fast and short if you need to. So the answer I would say is, if you don't think about complexity as number of elements, in other words, you need more than one, but it's not like 20 is more complex than 4. What's more complex is making the 4 meaningful and showing how they are true and balancing, showing the characters having to deal with being torn in two directions. But that doesn't mean you need 14 plots and 16 characters. Complexity, you can have complexity with the 3-character story, with 2-character story. So what I would say is, I think that you don't want to confuse number, scale, with actual depth. Depth has to do with not simplifying the ideas. Like, if it's a crime story, is it just, we want to get away with the crime? Or is, the cost of this crime is this community is damaged? That makes a complexity because you don't want the community damaged, but you do want the people to get away with their crime. That causes complexity. So that's my answer.